and welcome to my channel. Today I'm harvesting a ton of eggplants and I thought it was the perfect opportunity to show you guys how to grow them from seed all the way to harvest. Plus I'll be sharing my expert tips to help you mitigate pests, diseases, and be successful growing eggplant. My name is Jara. I teach people how to garden, grow food, raise backyard chickens, and now beekeeping. If these homesteading type topics interest you, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I post videos and or shorts on a daily basis to help educate and inspire others. Did you know that eggplants are perennial? On average, they live and will produce fruit for you for 3 years. They're also part of the nightshade family, just like tomatoes and peppers. And I have to admit, I did not like eggplants until I started growing them. I just don't like vegetables that have a mushy texture. When you grow your own eggplant, you can control when to harvest them. So that means I can harvest them when they're more on the firm side. It seems like the eggplants in the grocery store have either been sitting there for a long time or were harvested a little bit past their prime once they started getting really soft. And that translates to mushy texture when you cook them. When you grow beautiful vegetables like this in your own garden, most likely you're not going to just throw them away. You're going to find some delicious recipes to use them up. My absolute favorite way to eat eggplant is eggplant parmesan. I also like to grill them, deep fry them, and make baba ganoush, if I'm saying that correctly. It's basically a dip that is kind of similar to hummus. So I encourage you, if you don't like eggplant, please try growing them. You will be pleasantly surprised. When you're shopping for eggplant seeds, you'll notice that they come in a wide variety of different shapes and colors, because some cultivars are better than others depending on the recipe and things that you're going to cook with. You'll notice that they come in a wide range of colors. You can get some that are white, lavender, purple, or very dark, like almost black. Eggplants also come in a wide range of shapes. You have super little tiny ones like the size of grapes. You have some that are bigger and more round in shape. And then you have some that are very long and thin. And I'll show you a couple examples of those because I have quite a few growing in my garden right now. So how do you choose the right one? I always recommend that you choose the one that is best for your final application. What do you plan to make with them? This one right here is probably what you most commonly see in the grocery store. Those big, dark, almost black type of market style eggplants. In my opinion, these make for some really good dips like baba ganoush or eggplant parmesan. This is an example of the long and thin kind. This variety is called long pink tongue and it will get much bigger than this, but typically you'll find this in like Asian cuisine and stir fries. If you like eggplant parmesan and like to cook with a lot of Italian recipes, I recommend this variety. This one is called Rosa Bianca. It's an Italian heirloom. The fruit is really beautiful. It's like lavender with white striping, and this makes like the best eggplant parmesan. Some eggplant varieties are super tiny, like this Thai lavender frog eggplant. You can find seeds for many of the cultivars I just showed you on my website, along with unique plants and monthly growing guides. So go check it out at jarasgarden.com. Let's talk about site selection. Eggplants are part of the nightshade family just like peppers and tomatoes. They require full sun, at least 8 hours of direct full sun. If you're in Florida like me, 8 hours of direct sun is super intense. So I recommend you plant them in a spot that gets a lot of bright morning sun, but afternoon shade. And this is especially helpful to get these plants to survive through the summer. Because in garden zones like mine, I'm zone 9B, we get several days in a row of temperatures above 100 degrees. When temperatures are that high, it kind of induces the plants to stop growing and flowering. Most likely you're not going to harvest a lot from it during the summer. And your goal should be to get the plant just to survive, so that way once temperatures cool down, usually at the end of September, they will perk back up, start putting on new growth, flowering, and then you'll be able to harvest again during fall. Just like peppers and tomatoes, eggplants like well composted soil that is rich in organic material. Most of the time I grow them in straight compost. The plants also get really big depending on the cultivar that you've selected. For example, the Black Beauty eggplants that I grow can get like 4 feet tall. Their branches also start bending and can even break because the fruit is so big and heavy. You will need to stake them or support them in some way. I really like the extra big tomato cages that you find in most hardware stores. Or you can use a spool and string system, which is actually what I use for my tomatoes. But there's a wire that runs over the top here, and I connect a spool where I release this string, and you can see the spool back there, that little white spool. I release the string, wrap it around the branches, and then hook it up. So that really supports the branches and prevents them from breaking, especially when they're loaded with fruit. I highly recommend that you plant these smaller cultivars, like the little grape size eggplants, at least 2 feet apart. The bigger ones like the Black Beauty and the Rosa Bianca, I would space them at least 3 feet apart. Remember, these plants are perennial. They're going to be growing in this spot for a really long time. So just give them a little extra space. Trust me, they will fill it all out. Here's a tip for those of us that live in rainy climates, like me here in Florida, where it starts raining like a monsoon every single day during the summer. Eggplants do like moderate amounts of water, but constant water every single day to the point where the soil is wet all the time is not ideal for eggplants. They are not happy with those kinds of conditions. I find that they really benefit from allowing the soil to dry out in between watering. I really like to grow peppers and eggplants in grow bags, or at least containers. Generally, grow bags have a bad rap because they dry out so quickly, which is true, but sometimes you can use that to your advantage. Since it rains every day during the summer here in my garden, I will grow crops that are kind of sensitive to root rot or just don't like being wet constantly in grow bags, and that includes peppers, eggplants, herbs. They can handle the rainy days so much better when they're growing in grow bags that dry out quickly. Let me show you how to start seeds. I do have a really in-depth video guide all about seed starting, all the products, the setup, everything that I recommend. So if you want to get more details about that, which is applicable not just to growing eggplants, but like anything that you want to start from seed, go check out that video. Just so you know, eggplants and peppers take forever from seed to get to a large enough size that I deem ready to be transplanted into the garden, and that is completely normal. For whatever reason, they're kind of slow getting started, but then once you get them into the ground in the garden, they start taking off from there. I recommend that you start them 3 months ahead of time of whatever your target date is for getting them transplanted into your garden. In general, you're going to start them indoors 12 weeks before your last spring frost date. That way you get them transplanted into the garden as soon as all danger of frost has passed. Once they're transplanted in the garden, they do take like 90 to 120 days to start producing. Therefore, they will need 4 to 5 months of consistently warm weather to grow and start producing. Because of that, I do not recommend that you direct sow the seeds. They take forever to germinate. They take forever to get to a nice big size. I have a tendency to forget that I direct sowed the seeds. I highly recommend that you use a bigger size container to start the seeds because they're going to be living in this container for 12 weeks. I don't like wasting my time potting up. So by growing them in a bigger container to begin with, I don't have to pot them up or any of that. I really like to use solo cups, but you can go with the 4-inch pot sizes. My container has been filled with seed starting mix and is pre-moistened. I like to put 2 seeds per solo cup. Place the seed on the soil surface and press it down just a little bit. And you're going to cover with a little amount of soil, not too deep. Then you're going to place your containers on top of a heat mat. I highly recommend that you use a heat mat for anything that requires a warm soil temperature to germinate, like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. You will greatly speed up germination by using the heat mats, which help to keep the soil extra warm. Eggplants can take anywhere between 5 to 14 days to germinate. As soon as they germinate, they're going to require light. And that's basically true for anything that you're going to start from seeds. Most likely you're starting these indoors, so I highly recommend you get some grow lights, or in my case, I really like to use shop lights. These are 4-foot shop lights. They're really inexpensive compared to grow lights. But you just have to make sure that you get the shop lights that are 5,000 kelvins or higher. That's for the daylight range. And I just zip tied this to my shelving unit. When they sprout, you want to keep the light about 3 inches away from the seedlings. As the seedlings grow and get taller, you're going to adjust the light and move it up. Here's some eggplant seedlings that I started a few weeks ago. Initially, when they germinate, the first 2 set of leaves are called the cotyledons. I highly recommend that you fertilize your seedlings as soon as they start growing the first set of true leaves. The first set of true leaves appears right after those 2 cotyledons. I recommend that you use a liquid fertilizer because it's easier for the seedlings to absorb. Whatever fertilizer you use, make sure you mix it at half the strength of whatever the directions say. This fish fertilizer says 2 tablespoons per gallon of water, so to feed my seedlings, I'm going to do 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. And I would fertilize them on a weekly basis. This will promote faster growth and much healthier transplants. Now this is my seed starting setup. I primarily do this on my screen patio porch because I'm in Florida and it's warm here the majority of the year. If I'm starting seeds like during the winter, or in the case with the eggplants 12 weeks before my last spring frost date, it is way too cold outside, so I actually move this indoors. If your eggplant seedlings are exposed to very cold temperatures, it'll actually stunt their growth and they might not recover from that. So it's very important that you keep them nice and warm. In about 12 weeks, your seedlings should be ready to transplant. When mine are ready, they are bigger than this, but I'm going to use this one for demonstration purposes. Dig your hole in a nice sunny spot with nice rich soil. Always put some kind of fertilizer in the planting hole. I really like organic granular fertilizer because it's gentle and it won't burn your plants. Mix it into the soil of the planting hole. Put your seedling into the planting hole and you're going to plant it at ground level. And that's it. Now that the eggplants are growing in your garden, let's talk about how to care for them. They do like water, but not as much as tomatoes. I find they do much better when you allow the soil to dry out a little bit in between watering. The perfect test for that is to stick your finger into the soil. If it's dry up to your first 2 knuckles, then you can water. Or obviously if the plants are drooping and they're stressed out, they might need some water. As the plants are growing, you want to examine them and just remove any dead, old, or diseased leaves. This will help prevent the spread of disease and deter pests. Just like tomatoes, you're going to want to remove the bottommost leaves. That prevents pathogens that live in the soil from backsplashing up onto the leaves of your plants, and then they'll spread. As far as fertilizing, I like to use organic granular fertilizer, and I will add small doses, maybe like 1/8 of a cup on a weekly basis, and that just helps keep the nutrient supply consistent. Again, if it's organic, it won't burn your plants. But if you're fertilizing on a weekly basis with the synthetic stuff, you might risk burning your plants. Let's talk about pests and diseases, because you will get them. Eggplants, just like tomatoes, are really susceptible to a host of different pests and diseases. Personally, I give up trying to identify what it is because here in Florida, we get them all, just everything. I really like to give you all a heads up on what pests or diseases you might experience when you're trying to grow something. That way you'll be able to identify it right away and you'll be prepared and know how to treat for it. Most commonly, I find 3 different kinds of pests on my eggplants. First are worms, the same kind of worms that like to chew up my tomatoes. Most of the time it's army worms. They're brown. They have 2 little black spots on their head. It kind of makes them look like they have eyes. And they will chew and poke holes through your leaves. For any kind of worm damage, I have one treatment for all of them. And it's spinosad or BT. Both are considered organic products and they're OMRI rated. Basically how this works is you're spraying a natural bacteria on the surface of the leaves. The worms will chew the leaves, therefore ingest the bacteria, and it disrupts their digestive system, effectively killing them. Spinosad is the same as BT except it has the added benefit of also killing on contact. No matter what you're spraying in your garden, I always recommend that you spray in the evening time once the pollinators have left, and you only spray the affected plants, just to be safe. If you want to find this same spinosad that I like to use, or any products for that matter, you can follow the link to Amazon in the description below. The other pests that you're going to get are aphids. Aphids tend to attack new tender growth because they like to suck the juices out of your plants. Usually aphids are an ant problem. Ants basically farm the aphids and protect them from predators because they like to eat the sweet secretions from the aphids. The first thing I would do is treat for the ants, and I really like to use those little green bait stations that have a stake at the bottom, and I just pop some around the infected area. You could also easily wash aphids off your plants with a hose. Most of the time when I get aphids, that's all that I will do. I won't even spray them to treat for it. And the reason for that is because aphids is the food source for ladybugs and a lot of other beneficial insects. If you treat for the aphids, you're getting rid of their food source and you want to attract the beneficial insects to your garden. Most of the time, the aphid problem doesn't get so out of control that it actually affects the fruits. Yes, it gets gross and ugly sometimes, but if it's not affecting your actual harvest or the fruit, then honestly, I just leave it alone. I already found a bunch of ladybugs on some of my eggplants, so I definitely don't want to treat on them. But let's say the situation gets so bad that your fruits are misshapen or affected in some way. In that case, you could spray with neem oil or basically make your own kind of spray out of some strong smelling essential type oils like peppermint or rosemary. You could also use this insecticidal soap. This is from Safer brand and it is also considered organic. You can also use insecticidal soap and spinosad or BT for the next and final most worst pest that I get on my eggplants. And that would be spider mites. Spider mites are super tiny microscopic spiders. They like to pierce the leaves of your plants and suck the juices out. Now they're super tiny, but they are in large numbers. So they literally will suck the juices out of your plant and kill them pretty quickly. Do you notice that white pattern on the leaves? It's super tiny little puncture holes from these spider mites. They are microscopic, so most likely you won't be able to see them with your eyes. But if you flip the leaf over, sometimes you can find very fine webbing. When you see spider mite damage, you need to treat for it right away. The population of the spider mites increases rapidly as each day goes by, and they will easily spread to other crops in your garden. So again, you can treat with the insecticidal soap or BT or spinosad. Lastly, let's talk about any kinds of diseases. They are part of the nightshade family, so they're susceptible to a lot of the same diseases as tomatoes and peppers. Sometimes you'll get yellow spotting or browning dried up edges. The most common leaf diseases you're going to see are powdery mildew, blight, and yellow spots. To treat for all leaf diseases, I use 1 cup of hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water. Mix that up and just spray your plants. The hydrogen peroxide will clean and disinfect the leaves, which is where the pathogens live and spread. Now I have an extra tip for you, especially if you live in colder climates, and that is how to winterize your eggplants, because these are perennial if you can get them to survive. If you're in zones 8 and up, most likely it doesn't get cold enough to actually kill your plants. I'm in zone 9B, all of these plants survived through my winter without being covered. I did get a couple nights where the temperatures dropped to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, but not any more than that, and they survived just fine. They may have got a little bit of cold damage, but it wasn't enough to kill the plants. However, some of you in like zone 8 and stuff can experience multiple days in a row with very cold weather. If that's the case, you might want to cover your plants. If you're in the colder zones where it definitely snows, you're going to have to do a little bit more to winterize these plants. Before you're expecting your first cold front, you're going to want to trim them all down. That basically induces the plant to go in sort of like a dormancy. Gently dig them up out of your garden. Try to conserve as much of the root ball as possible. Place them in a pot and bring them indoors for the rest of your winter. As soon as all danger of frost has passed, in springtime, you can transplant them back into your garden. Or just grow them in containers or grow bags, trim them down to induce that dormancy, and then bring them indoors. Hopefully you've been following all of these tips and tricks and your plants have started producing. I'm going to take you around as I harvest a bunch of my eggplants. First up are the Thai lavender frog eggplants. I highly recommend that you use scissors to cut the eggplants off the plant because they're not easy to just pick off and remove like tomatoes. Isn't that cute? I know they're small and you're probably like, what am I going to do with small tiny eggplants like this? But they line up perfectly on skewers if you want to grill eggplant. You know it's ready to harvest when this outer skin is nice and shiny. If it turns dull, it's kind of past its prime. Look at that. Isn't she beautiful? There's quite a few more on here, but they definitely can get a little bit bigger in size. Last, we have a bunch of the Rosa Biancas. When you're growing the lighter colored eggplants, it's harder to notice the glossiness. So for these, I like to test with my thumb. Gently press down with your thumb. It should give away a little bit and then bounce right back. Once harvested, eggplants don't last very long, so make sure you have a plan to use these up as quick as possible. Seriously, these things are so meaty that 2 of them could feed an entire family. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and feel inspired to try eggplant if you haven't done so already. If you have any questions, some tips for me, or maybe even some suggestions on varieties I should try growing next season, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.